Hi, everyone. It's Terry Bruce, and this is another 10-minute nonprofit evaluation tips. Now, this month, we're talking about data and data analysis, how to make meaning from data that you've been collecting, because until you can sort of analyze it and make meaning from it, you can't really distribute it and utilize it for decision making. And we're focused on analyzing some outputs and showing how basically just raw aggregated data doesn't mean anything. You have to start adding some context. And our goal here is to get up into beyond information and into the knowledge and wisdom buckets. And there's some very simple tools and very not time-consuming analyses that you can do to start moving you in that direction. It doesn't take like huge in-depth research studies and, giant in-depth analyses to start making some meaning from your data. All right, we're jumping right back to the data set that we've been playing with here that we're going to play with all month, and we're picking up right where we left off last week. So we had talked about some missing gaps in our data, and we had talked about computing sums, averages, counts versus distinct counts, and null versus zeros. So these are all some very important statistical concepts. Now, the next thing we might want to look at. So now we've figured out our sum and our average, and we now might want to start trying to make some meaning out of this data set. And this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. And again, context matters. This is that information, right? And trying to get up to knowledge. Knowledge answers the question, why? Well, why depends on the question we're asking. So we started talking about this last week, right? Was 64 people served good or bad? Is this 8 people enrolled in this class good or bad? What about this 11 and 15? Are these good or bad? Well, good or bad depends on the context. So let's say that this was a pilot program. We just got a new grant, maybe some workforce development money or something, or a Department of Education money to offer some adult learning classes in basic computer skills. And we didn't know how many people might show up to these classes. We weren't sure what topics people would be interested in. So this was a pilot program for the month of June where we ran a bunch of different classes to kind of get some data about what people were interested in and time of day to run the classes and how many people we might get involved in the classes. Well, then from that perspective, 64 enrollments is a good sizable data set. This is our first time doing it. We had no idea going in if it was going to succeed, if it was going to fall flat on our faces, who knows? From that context, 64 is great, and it starts providing us with some information on how to proceed now, right? Okay, we can tell that beginner Excel was pretty popular. We had 18 people, beginner Word 20, even advanced Word 11. We can see on average, we're going to attract about 13 people per class with our current setup of topics, days and times when we're offering this, and our advertising methodology. If our goal is to serve 1,000 people, then we can see, well, if we have to serve 1,000 people in a year out of 12 months, we need to serve 83 people per month. And we served 64. We were 20 short, but we could probably make some tweaks if we did wider advertising, held more classes. We probably would be able to meet that 83 people per month. And then if we do 5 classes a month, we'd have to have on average 17 people per class. And we were at 13. So we just need to increase our average participation just a little bit more, and we'd be able to meet that goal, no problem. So this is how we can see, this could be goal enrollment per class. So now we can start seeing, now we've got information, we've got 2 data points, right? We've got our goal and we've got our current average, and we can see where we need to move the needle. We need to get on average 4 extra people per class. And now we can start figuring out, how do we do that? Try different advertising methodologies, offer different classes, offer different days or times. We could have, instead of doing a pilot program, we could have also, done a like a needs assessment in the community. And certainly we could have gone out and done some interviews or focus groups and asked people like, what kind of classes do you want? Would you take this class? What do you want to learn? What skills do you need? What days or times are best, etc. But we could do it either way. We could do a pilot program. We could do a needs assessment. We could have done some combination of the two. And then we can start figuring out what's going to help us move forward. So let's say that now I move to another tab. We've got 2 months worth of data. So we run another cohort and we've got 2 months worth of data. We've got the same instructors. We've got our average, our total number of people who registered for each class and the dates. And we've got June and July. So we can come through here and we can do the same sort of analysis that we did last time, right? Equals sum. And now we've got all this data. Very sexy, very exciting. Here's our average equals average. Beep, 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 beep. There we go. So now we have on average 13.5. I'm just going to tell it to round that up because it's just easier. Never get rid of our decimals. Woohoo. Okay, so now we've gone up to an average of 14 people per class. So we can see that in June we had 13. We've gone up by 1 person. So we changed something was different, and woohoo, we got an extra person on average. So we're moving in that right direction towards that 17 that we're supposed to serve if we're trying to serve 1,000 people per year. But we can see again, like, okay, so what's going on? We have some classes that are just really low enrollment. Now, beginner word in June had 20 people. Beginner word in July only had 9 people. So you can see that the story starts to change the more data that you have. Back here when it was just June, beginner word was our most popular class. We had 20 enrollments. This looked like a rock star class we would want to offer every single month. But the second month, that went way down. Why? What happened? Well, there could be a lot of reasons, right? It could be that everybody who needed beginner word took it in June, and we didn't need to offer it a second month in a row. Maybe we need to do every other month or quarterly. There's just not enough demand for beginner word to fill a monthly class. Could be the date and time change. We were offered a different day of the week or a different time. Again, we're missing the critical data out of the spreadsheet that would allow us to sort of cross-correlate variables. It's the same teacher each time, so Jenkins, but it could be the 20 people who took Jenkins' class didn't like Jenkins as an instructor and has gone into the community and said, you know what, don't take a class with that Jenkins person because they're a terrible instructor. So it could actually been, this was unfamiliar, and now that there are people who have experienced it, could be just bad reviews basically in the community that Jenkins is terrible. Now we can see over here, Jenkins also for July, their second class, it was kind of in the middle. It wasn't the lowest enrollment, but 12, it's on the lower end. It's sort of in the middle. It's closer to the average in the middle here, but we had certainly Diaz and Smith had much higher enrollments for their classes than Jenkins had for either of their classes. So it could be the instructor has gotten a bad reputation after teaching 2 classes the previous month. So this is where, and again, now we look at beginner PowerPoint. Again, we have 2 classes, and one had 27 and one had 6. Holy moly, this was like our most popular. This is even better than the 18 people who went beginner Excel last time. And again, it could be both of these months. It could be this was our capacity. We only could fit 10 people into this classroom. We had to start an overflow class. So it was only 8 extra people, but if there'd been 1 class, it would have been 18, which would have been one of our stronger showings. Beginner PowerPoint has 32 people. So we can say, okay, well, again, if this was an overflow class, that would explain why there's so few enrollments. And again, beginner word, this could have been overflow from the previous month. We're like, listen, 18 was all we could serve the previous month. These 9 people were off the waiting list. And that's, we just decided to run a class that maybe we weren't planning to run And again, maybe it's in this computer lab where you only have 8 computers and maybe 9 was the capacity. Making meaning and getting up to that knowledge bucket requires the ability to cross-correlate variables. So this goes back to my point last week of you need to make sure you have enough data on your spreadsheet to make assumptions and to analyze what happened so that you can then figure out why and answer that question, why? Okay, first of all, why did our average enrollment go up? So we served more people, but why do some of our classes have so few people in them? And also, you know, one calculation we could do right here is return on investment. How much did it cost to run this class? And if you only have this many people, is it cost effective to even run a class with this few people? So it could be we have one computer lab that only has, you know, 8 computers in it, but is it even efficient to run a class in that lab? Can we add another cohort on a different day and time in one of the larger computer labs to make it more cost effective to actually run those classes? And then convert that small computer lab for some other use, right? So these are the types of questions we may want to answer from this data, but those are very different questions and they all require different data points. You can try sticking all of that data on one spreadsheet, but then it starts getting a little bit messy, where you're going to start needing to go into doing your analyses on different spreadsheets. And we're going to talk about that next week and kind of how to deal with that. But right now, we're still kind of in that realm of data is important, but the right data. You're probably drowning in data. You probably have tons of data. But is your data collated onto the spreadsheets where you need it? Those goal numbers, for instance, how many people you need to serve, may live in a manager's head, might be in a grant application, but is it accessible to you and is it in your tracking sheets or your data management system so that you can pull that into reports? The cost to run a class, do you have those budget numbers? Are those accessible to you to do a return on investment calculation of what the average cost per person is running these classes or the cost benefit analysis for different class sizes? If you don't have access to that data, if nobody on staff has that data, if that data doesn't live anywhere, you can't do that calculation. And so you got to go sit with finance and figure out, and like the department manager, and figure out like what the budget is for each of these classes and what the costs are for the instructor's time, the overhead for the lab, you know, electricity and space and the equipment and the class materials and all of that stuff to figure out that. So again, you may have the data within your organization, but it may not be accessible to the person who needs to do these calculations, or it may not be in a format that makes it easy to come in. Because I can tell you right now, I'm just doing these formulas here like this to show you quickly. This is not a conducive way, by the way, to do this, because you can see if I'm going to come in and try to add my August data, now I've got to like add rows and push these sums down, and this just gets messy. You really don't want to be doing these calculations inside your data sheet where you're storing your data, because then it becomes hard. And then you start doing crazy things where you've got like just June, and now I've got June and July. Am I supposed to add another spreadsheet for June, July, and August? Or if I'm doing every month on a separate spreadsheet, just June, just July, just August, well, how do I tabulate the 3 of them together? I need a 4th sheet where I've got all my totals that's rolling up data from the other spreadsheets. It gets really messy really fast. So I can't overstate, and I'm going to continue sort of banging on this drum about having nice, neat data sheets that have all your data that you need in various columns and rows, and nothing that breaks that pattern. You don't want like miscellaneous sums and calculations in the middle of your spreadsheet and subtotal rows and columns and other weird things. You want a nice, neat data sheet that just has your data. And then we're going to use that to feed into report things. All right, that's it for this week. So again, you know, we're focused on trying to get information. So we got information now, right? Last week, we talked about like data by itself is kind of useless. It's just, yay, we served 64 people, but who cares? You need information. You need at least 2 data points that you can compare. Well, now we've got 2 data points. How many people we served in June? How many people we served in July? But still, all that tells us is our average has gone up. So we served more people in July than we did in June. Okay, the numbers are going up and positively trending in a positive direction. Yay us, we're moving closer to our goal of 17 enrollments per class. What we don't know is why the numbers went up. We don't know why some of these classes have so few people, and if that's good or bad. Again, if those are held in a classroom where you can only serve 8 people, those numbers are fine. If those are in classrooms that could hold 20 people, those numbers are terrible. And we need that context. And then if the numbers are terrible, why and what do we do about it? And we still don't have the data we need to answer those questions. So again, information and comparing 2 data points, it's still just outputs, right? It's still just volume, and volume is greater or lesser than the previous volume, but it's not meaningful. It's not telling us why, and it's not pointing us in a direction of what to do about it. If it's good, how do we continue building on it, and how do we ensure our continued success? If it's bad, how do we correct it? That's where we need to get to, and we need to make sure that we're collecting and analyzing the data that answers those questions. Why did the numbers go up or down or stay the same? And what are we going to do about it? And that's wisdom, knowledge and wisdom. And that's what you want your data sets to be able to answer for you. And if you don't have the data necessary to get you to wisdom, knowledge and wisdom, then you got to figure out where that data lives and how to get it into your data set and into your tracking system. All right, that's it for this week. As always, if you have any questions or need personalized assistance, feel free to drop me an email at terrybruce@gmail.com or leave a comment in the Substack. We'll continue on this vein next week, and I'll talk to you then.